Afternoon, everyone. I hope appreciate everyone's attention to this matter and making time today. Before I turn it over to Wilmington Mayor Bill Saffo, I just want to remind everyone we have a number of elected officials and national organizations represented on the call. I appreciate all the media's attention to this, and as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to put in the chat any questions that you may have. Julie Murphy with JPM Strategies is helping me monitor that. As well, just to let you know how this is going to go, we're going to have a number of elected officials speak at the outset. We have a list of priorities that we're going to go through, and afterwards we will allow 20 minutes for question and answers. And if you have anything after the meeting, any follow-up questions or concerns you have, please feel free to communicate with my Julie Murphy. With that, Mayor Saffo, turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here today. I do have some prepared text that I would like to read to the group before we get into the question part of it, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tony. But good afternoon, everyone, and we appreciate your time and attention to what we obviously believe is an issue that is critical to the safety, economy, and future of our region and state. This issue that has drawn us together in a bipartisan alliance is disaster recovery and resilience, but very specifically, flood resilience. In the aftermath of the devastation of Hurricane Florence, I and several other leaders found value in sharing advice and concerns amongst each other, since we all were impacted by a lot of different storms over the years. We started to request state officials to meet with us as a group of mayors and county commission chairs. This involved the two myself and Pender County Commissioner Chairman George Brown, arranging larger and larger gatherings in locations like Burgaw, Wallace, and Onslow County, with more and more local leaders seeing the value in this type of collaboration. Ultimately, we've had over 60 mayors and county commission chairs participate in our meetings, signing on to policy letters, making state general assembly visits, Washington, D.C. Hill visits, and even meetings with White House officials. Perhaps the most valuable of all of these are the opportunities that we've had to come together and have high-level government officials and national organizations come to us with updates to hear our very serious concerns. While we've had a large number of elected officials participate, there has been a core leadership team, and they are with us here today. Chairman George Brown has unofficially co-chaired this effort with me, but is unfortunately unavailable today, but is represented by his county manager, Chad McEwen, Wallace Mayor Charles Ferrier, Whiteville Mayor Terry Mann, Brunswick County Commission Vice Chair Mike Forte, and Jacksonville Mayor Sammy Phillips. The value and opportunity to evaluate our voice and work as an alliance with key state and federal decision makers has led us to start the process of formalizing this alliance. Chairman George Brown and I will be sending out communications to mayors and county commission chairs throughout Eastern North Carolina, requesting their formal membership and continued involvement in this alliance. This will be critical as we seek to be a unified and bipartisan voice for these issues critical to our region as well as our state. But what we are most excited to share with you this morning is our state legislative priorities for this coming session. Our efforts have attracted the assistance and support of the Pew Charitable Trust, the Environmental Defense Fund, and the American Flood Coalition. Our staffs have worked tirelessly over the past few months with these highly respected organizations to develop these priorities. And I just want to say, as the mayor of the city of Wilmington and as somebody that was significantly impacted from Hurricane Florence, I believe that this is an important, probably one of the most important issues for Eastern North Carolina in the aftermath of not only Hurricane Florence, but also of Hurricane Matthew, also tropical storms now that pass through the area, and the impacts that are having on all of our communities, whether it be rural or whether it be urban, and that we must work together, working with our state officials and federal officials to help alleviate a lot of the damage and a lot of the issues that we continue to face as a region, one of the fastest growing regions in the state of North Carolina. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony McEwen, our legislative assistant, and to take us into some of the priorities that we will be asking our state delegation and our local leaders in Raleigh to look at. So Tony, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Saffo. At this point, we're going to go through our list of 6 priorities. And to aid me in doing so, we're going to have some of our elected officials as well as some of the policy experts with the national and state organizations that have been at our side on this effort. But let me just tell you briefly how this came about. There was a number of local staff members working on behalf of their elected officials with the American Flood Coalition and the Environmental Defense Fund, who worked tirelessly to capture the concerns of local staff leadership as well as local elected officials to put forth this document, these 6 priorities and the substance that goes along with them. Again, I can't thank the American Flood Coalition as well as the Environmental Defense Fund enough, but as well the local organizations that have led the way, Pender County, the City of Leland, their deputy manager and other staff, the Cape Fear Council of Government, Wes McLeod, has worked tirelessly on this effort. The City of Jacksonville, and as well the City of Wilmington, and there was a number of others, but in particular, those folks have put in a tremendous amount of time, and I want to say thank you to them on behalf of this effort. So as we get into the priorities, the first one, and like I said, I'll just kind of give you the top line, and then I'm going to call on some folks that can elaborate probably a little better than I can. But number 1, our first priority is to fund an actionable flood resilience blueprint. And with that, I'd like for Vice Chairman of the Brunswick County Commission, Mike Forte, to chime in. You're muted, Commissioner. It wouldn't be a Zoom.
You would think I'd know better after over a year of doing Zooms, right? What I'd like to say is that with each new weather event that hits Brunswick County and all of Eastern North Carolina, we experience new flooding issues as the water courses are constantly changing. Water reactions change, as do our floodplains. There are worsening conditions and situations for the last 4 years, particularly with hurricanes Matthew, Florence, Michael, and Isaias. Our citizens look to us for answers and funding. Flood insurance has become mandatory in most areas, and the rates are through the roof and unaffordable for most, particularly our senior population, which for us makes up about 1/3 of our population. The 6 priorities that this alliance have come up with will certainly help each county obtain their objective to correct a good portion of our problems. Any data or statistics that the state can provide would help us tremendously and would be greatly appreciated. We really need some help with all of these issues, and that'll work for me.
And I'd also like to bring on Will McDowell, who is with the Environmental Defense Fund. Will, I appreciate you offering some comments.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mayor, for helping lead this effort. As Commissioner Forte just described, communities need actionable data and science to target and design effective flood mitigation strategies. They need this data and modeling to ensure that public investments are going to work, that taxpayer dollars will be spent wisely, and that residents' lives and livelihoods will be protected. That's what a flood resilience blueprint will help provide. Bring together the science, the data, and the modeling into one place so that the communities can help develop solutions, and so decision makers at local, state, and federal levels can help fund those investments. Other states like Iowa and Louisiana have taken this route. They've developed plans, and when national competition occurred a couple of years ago, those states were at the top of the funding priority list, getting over $90 million for their local communities. Much larger states like New York and California got about half that amount. So these programs can really help drive federal investments. And then finally, North Carolina is well positioned for this. Our emergency management division, our Department of Transportation, local universities, as well as private consultants and businesses have been developing this data. We have a good start, But what's needed is a common framework to bring all this together so that local communities can really have access to that data. That's why the state needs a flood resilience blueprint. Again, we think this investment will pay for itself in more effective projects, in cost savings, and in using taxpayer dollars wisely. So we're excited to talk further about this and to help Eastern North Carolina get the information they need. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Will. Our second item is what initially brought Mayor Saffo to bring together some of the county commission chairs in the region, and that was concern over transportation. And so our second item is to ensure resilient and critical transportation infrastructure. And I'd like to first call on Mayor Phillips of Jacksonville. Mayor Phillips.
Good afternoon, Tony. One of the things that we found out during Florence was how vulnerable we are as far as our transportation system is concerned. Everybody was affected, you know, when you have I-40, 17, 70, all these highways. Jacksonville was basically cut off for many days, not being able to get anything in and not being able to push anything out. A lot of people who had gone to Raleigh and areas outside of the danger zone, they had, it was probably a week for a lot of them could ever even get back into the city to check their homes and all. The other thing that we experienced too was we couldn't get critical needs such as food, stocking grocery stores, gasoline, diesel fuel. All these things were just tied up. One of the things also with Highway 70 was that the Duke Power Company that services our area, they staged all their emergency response equipment in Goldsboro, and they were locked in Goldsboro. They were locked out of Jacksonville basically. So it was several days before we were able to get crews in here to start trying to restore power. So we learned from Florence. We learned that we are very vulnerable, and you know it is important that we address these critical transportation arteries. I was reading the 2019 study that DOT had done on the infrastructure, and I think it was a very thorough study, research, but I don't know as though there's been able to be a whole lot done with it because of the fact that there's not that transportation dollars aren't there to do it. But I think it's important with that for us going on to be able to have, you know, to be able to get from Jacksonville to Wilmington or from Wallace to Wilmington or you know, have those routes clear. You also have a national security concern with the Marine Corps base here at Camp Lejeune, the air station at Cherry Point, Fort Bragg. These roads, these highways need to be passable, and they need to be, you know, be able to get to Sunny Point to load ships, or get to Morehead City to load ships, you know, in the event that there needs to be some type of troop deployment. So this is very critical. It's a very critical need that we need to have addressed, and it's going to have to come from both the state level and the national level.
Mayor Saffo, did you want to add anything to that? I know that's an issue you've been passionate about.
Well, and going to Mayor Phillips' point, the infrastructure totally collapsed. I mean, we could not get food, we could not get water, we could not get supplies or fuel into our communities. You're talking about an area now from Jacksonville, North Carolina, all the way down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, taking into consideration some of the fastest growing counties in the state being totally cut off from the world for about 4 days. And if you're the mayor of a city, or you're chairman of a county commission group, or whoever, elected officials, it gets very hairy down here when people are literally fighting over fuel. We had to literally go over to the state ports and commandeer a tanker just to try to keep our public service people out there, our police and fire officials continue operating, because we were running out of fuel. And we were literally cut off from the world. I know in Brunswick County that it had separated into 3 separate areas, 3 huge islands there. And all up and down the coast, it was disastrous. And we can't have the growth that we're seeing in this part of the state, the population that we have in this part of the state, and to be totally cut off from the world. When you're having to create landing zones and shopping centers for helicopters to bring in people from the surrounding counties and to try to get supplies into your community, it was something out of a war zone. And I can't emphasize how critical it is for us to get those highways elevated enough to get them out of these floodplains and flood prone areas. Interstate 40, Interstate 95, 24, 70, 17. These are all critical highways to our communities, and to get people in and out is critically important. And to have to wait 4 days before you can get critical supplies in your community, it can get very dicey. And I can assure you that we had some touch and go situations here that if it would have lasted another couple of days, I don't know what we would have done. But this is probably one of the most critical and important things that we can do as a state, is to make sure that we have a transportation grid that is reliable in the aftermath of a significant storm. And we are going to have more storms. And they seem, as they're coming up the coast, they seem to be getting bigger and wetter. And in particular case of Florence, it was on top of us for literally 48 hours, which I've never seen in my life. And to have over 36 inches of rainfall was just incredible. And I know some of the areas inland may have gotten even more than that. But I know Mayor Mann, I know your city was flooded significantly. You've had several floods in your particular area, but to be cut off from the world for that many days was just tough.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. And I'll tell you, as I said, the transportation issue was what seemed to be the original issue folks came together on. But it's been interesting as we've had, Mayor Saffo, as you know, as we've had more and more meetings with more and more communities on this. This next item is pretty much equally as important to the transportation arteries, and that is number 3, which is support riverine and stream management to reduce flooding. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our friend Mayor Farrier of Wallace. Mayor Farrier.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. Tony asked me to tell you a little bit about Florence and how it affected our community. I can tell you in 1999, we thought that Hurricane Floyd was our biblical 1,000-year event. It was bad for our community. We had flooding in houses. And we thought, well, once we get through this and recover, it's not going to happen again in our lifetime, and we're all going to be okay. But that was not what happened. In 2018, when Florence came through, it made Floyd look like almost a non-event. We had folks that had lived here during Floyd, and they said, well, the flood didn't get me in Floyd. I'm going to be okay for Florence. So they stayed in their homes. And after the hurricane and all the rain finally did leave us, the Northeast Cape Fear was out of its banks very, very quickly. We have a very nice residential area right at the edge of our town. Probably has a total at that time of 400 houses or so. 250 of those 400 houses flooded, some of them to the roof lines. It's just amazing to ride through that with in a boat, and all you see is the top of a roof of a house. And after you leave that community and go towards on Highway 41 towards Chinkopin, Beulaville, towards Jacksonville, even more flooding. Just tons of houses that had water in them, and you can ride that road right now and you still see houses that are vacant that had water in it. All the windows will be open, but there'll be no activity. You don't know whether that house will finally get repaired or whether it's slated to tear down. So the need for this riverine stream management is critical in our area. It is. I've heard people say that did repair their homes, they're going to do it one more time, and if it happens again, they're out of here. And that goes back to what Mayor Saffo was saying earlier about our economy. You get folks leaving your community, it's going to affect your economy. So, the disaster is there in our area, in our neighborhood. We're still recovering, and hopefully we can work with this group towards resiliency. But I can't emphasize enough the need for stream management. I truly wanted to touch on the transportation issue just a second. I know we've had folks talk about it already, but after the storm leaves you, you're trying to help your folks. We had folks out of homes. We had them sleeping in churches. We were trying to get them fed. Of course, there were no gas stations open. You couldn't get fuel. You had no electricity, couldn't get food. So, did try to get in here and start work, but they couldn't get to us because the road infrastructure wouldn't let them get to us. We had folks like the Missouri Baptist Disaster Group trying to come in and set up feeding stations to help our folks. They couldn't get to us. It was just trying to do anything that we could to help our folks. And we had a lot of folks displaced and out of homes. Our emergency shelters were running over. It was react from moment to moment. And you were reacting, there wasn't any planning involved. You were just trying to help your folks in any way you could. So the need for this committee, the need for finances, we got counties involved here. We got large cities involved. We got smaller towns like mine. And I can tell you that none of us have the money needed to try to address these issues on our own. So we're going to need help. We're going to need planning. And hopefully this will be the first step in putting all this together and getting help from our friends in Raleigh and hopefully Washington as well.
Thank you, Mayor Farrier. Chad McEwen, Pender County Manager, if you wanted to add a few words as well on that item.
Thank you, Tony. First of all, just like to pass on regrets and regards from Chairman Brown, who had a work obligation today that he was unable to get out of. But thank you for Mayor Sappho and Tony's leadership, along with Chairman Brown, on this alliance, and it's great work that's pushing forward to the state level. Just to touch on a few things as a follow-up to Mayor Farrier, we oftentimes, rightly so, I guess, look at hurricane events as a major barrier island storm surge type event and threat. A lot of times those risks overshadow the true real risk that inland folks face in riparian areas and lower elevated areas. Our recent experience with Hurricanes Matthew and Florence exposed these vulnerabilities. With Hurricane Florence, I believe we collectively, for lack of a better word, lacked the imagination that we could experience a storm in a much greater magnitude and severity than Floyd, Fran, and Matthew. We lacked the imagination that a single storm, like Mayor Sappho said, could sit over our area for 40 hours and drop 40 inches of rain. We lacked the imagination that during that same storm, I-40, US 74, US 17, NC 53, NC 210 would be blocked and essentially create islands of major metropolitan areas. We lacked the capacity to imagine that after 6 days after the storm made landfall, that a 10-foot wall of water would head downstream towards Wilmington and blow out the culverts at US 421 at Fishing Creek on the New Hanover-Pender County line. Collectively now, I think we have that ability to imagine these really profound events and their impacts, both from a public health standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. We've got to also push to understand that the old reactive or at times non-existent approach to addressing these inland flooding issues is no longer acceptable. We must push for the old and antiquated standards of design, particularly dealing with our roads, to be pushed forward and account for this new reality of the storms that we're facing. On a positive note, it's extremely encouraging that discussions have started at the state level that hydraulic design for these primary roads will involve a 50-year event design and preventing overtopping on primary roads for a 100-year event. If implemented in future design and reconstruction of these roadways, it'll significantly improve our ability to be more resilient for future events for the entire region. Just to point out the three components of this portion of the blueprint, resiliency blueprint, we're going to advocate for more resources for proactively and targeted riverine and stream management programs. Ideally, General Assembly would provide us communities with access to substantial and annually reliable funds for technical resource and programs to implement riverine and stream management programs. The second one, there must be greater collaboration and cooperation in working with communities to identify jurisdictional challenges. This would involve DEQ, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As most of us know, maneuvering through these agencies can be challenging, cumbersome, and oftentimes illogical. We hope to establish an intergovernmental working group in which the DEQ, local governments, and other stakeholders can identify jurisdictional challenges related to this process. Finally, significant effort and work needs to be put in improving coordination between the Corps of Engineers and local communities. Again, that process is very time consuming, cumbersome, and illogical at times. So a normal process of a Corps review, we all probably remember the days when we would complain about a 10-week, 2-month, maybe 3-month review of the Corps for jurisdictional determination. We recently received a jurisdictional determination from the Corps that took over 12 months to complete. So that process has to be streamlined, has to be more friendly in terms of getting these streams prepared for the next event. Additionally, the Corps has to increase resources to assist small and financially challenged communities with both the conceptualization and rolling out stream management efforts. So with that, Tony, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chad. I'm going to very quickly go through the fourth item, which is incorporate resilience investments as an allowable use into any new local revenue authority. Let me be clear on that item that in no way is this alliance or any members of it advocating for any type of tax increase. Merely what this is about is if there is additional revenue authority granted down the line, whether it be for transportation, infrastructure, what have you, to local governments, that resilience investments be an allowable usage of those funds. And I'm going to speed through these next couple items and then we're going to move forward on the agenda. But number 5 is increased resiliency capacity and technical assistance to local governments. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Whiteville Mayor Terry Mann.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me. And I'll just say that Columbus County, Whiteville and Columbus County is the only county here that doesn't have some coastal water. So we're delighted to be involved in this collaboration, and we thank the leaders for including Columbus County in this. I'll just say that Whiteville, during Matthew and Florence, Whiteville, Matthew had about 40 to 50% of our downtown business district flooded. And then, like Mary Farrier said, we thought that we lived through that, we were free for a while. And then 2 years later, we have Florence, and 100% of our downtown business district flooded. We had businesses that had been in business for 100 years that had never had floodwaters in their buildings. So it is something that's getting worse for us. And then we have Fair Bluff that's 25 miles west of here that it's right there on the Lumbee River, and they've completely lost their downtown and are in the process of getting grants to relocate a business district. And even though it was a small business district for a small community, it was very viable before the flooding. So, this bullet point of increased resiliency, capacity, and technical assistance is important for us, because in Whiteville and other communities in Columbus County, we just can't afford, none of us have engineers on staff, and we just can't afford to get these projects designed and not know that we're going to get this grant funding. In fact, we've applied, we're in the process of applying for one of the new FEMA BRIC programs now. And we feel it's a very innovative program. It incorporates ecotourism, economic development, and mitigation of floodwaters. But I know we're competing with, it's competitive, and I know we're competing with municipalities and county governments and whatever that have engineers on staff. They're basically going in there with shovel-ready projects, and that seems to be the magic word now with any infrastructure projects, and they're so competitive as they are, and then not being able to afford to get to the point where you've got a shovel-ready project is really a deterrent for the small communities. One of the biggest things in this that I like about this bullet point is to establish a North Carolina Resilience office around the state and have locations around the state that can assist towns and counties to do these projects. And I think one benefit for us in Columbus County would be if we had something ongoing capacity for this is it would bring all of our towns and communities together. So when we work on a project, it would we could make sure that 10 miles down the stream that these people could work on the same project that would benefit the project. We've done some small projects in the city limits of Whiting, but they really haven't had the impact that they should have because the county has not been able to do it after they leave our city limits. So I think having a resiliency office based, one of the suggestions is maybe in the local COG office, which I think would be an excellent idea. And that I think would have more collaboration, even more collaboration, working on flooding projects with that. So with that said, I know we're kind of running out of time, so I'll turn it back to you, Tony.
Mayor Mann, thank you. And I'm going to move on to the final one. And that's fund flood mitigation and innovative pilot projects. Will McDowell with Environmental Defense Fund.
Thanks, Tony. I just wanted to quickly, this group has recognized that to address flooding in Eastern North Carolina, we're gonna have to be innovative and think about how we can use existing programs in new ways. One example of that is a program that the legislature last year approved and expanded at the Division of Mitigation Services. This is a program that uses existing state contracting mechanisms to engage private companies to design and develop flood mitigation projects. It's a very rapid approach to getting flood mitigation projects in the ground, creates local jobs, and protects local communities. Due to some COVID-related budget pressures in last year's session, they were unable to fund the program. We're now hopeful that there will be a chance to put some money through this Division Mitigation Services program to create some demonstrations to show what's possible for folks in Eastern North Carolina. Doing so will, again, create the chance to see what's possible and then to secure additional funding, as Mayor Mann was just talking about. So we're excited about this opportunity.
Thank you, Will. And so that's our 6 priorities. But I would like to take a brief moment before we get to a Q&A. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We have a document, a 5-pager, that certainly provides much more nuance to these 6 items than what you've heard today. And so I'll be happy to follow up with that with anyone who requests it. But what I do want to say that not only are we coming out with these priorities and with this strong alliance, but the time is now. And I'll call on a couple of folks real quick to drive this point home. But we're having conversations with our legislators. Representatives of this organization have recently met with House Majority Leader, several influential state senators, and we're really getting somewhere on this issue. And not only that, we're very confident that our state legislators right now are taking this issue very seriously. They've heard from their citizens, they've heard from this alliance, they've heard from thought leaders on these issues, and we know that they're taking that seriously, and we are very confident that they're going to act during this session of the General Assembly on these issues. And with that, I'd like to call on my friend Dante Katrona with the American Flood Coalition to give a little bit of kind of high-level policy insight on what we're seeing and hearing right now.
Thank you, Tony. And I'm Dante Katrona, Senior Government Relations Director with the American Flood Coalition. And we've had the pleasure with working with over 20 members across the state of North Carolina. And we're proud to have advised the Alliance on these priorities to help build a stronger, more resilient Eastern North Carolina. The time is now, as Tony said, and you have alignment coming up with the Biden administration, with Congress in Washington, and with your leaders in Raleigh, talking about infrastructure, talking about building back better, talking about deploying resources and capital to our communities of all sizes to help kind of move forward as a stronger nation. I think the mayors and the Alliance really detailed how they have been uniquely impacted by not just hurricanes, but all sorts of flooding, inland, coastal, and the need for help. There is a universal commitment to want to do something and lead and get ahead of this issue, and recognizing that North Carolina's homes, businesses, and communities are at risk. You're all familiar with the statistics, right? 3 of the past 5 years, a major hurricane has hit North Carolina. Many of the communities are still recovering today. It is seeing that recovery that there is the desire to get out in front. And each year that goes by without investment in resilience and resilient infrastructure really increases the burden on the taxpayer and the local communities. Hurricanes Florence and Matthew, right? Over $3.5 billion spent in disaster recovery. Imagine what we can do if we invest a fraction of that now and deploy those resources to help get ahead. Local governments want to get ahead of that next flood event. They desperately need support from state and federal partners. And as you've heard today, to do this, communities need to understand their flood risk. They need to be able to best assess and engage all options to address current flooding and break that costly, never-ending cycle of funding and recovery. So really, from a Flood Coalition perspective, we commend the Alliance for showing leadership on this issue. It is a bipartisan issue. Flooding does not discriminate along political boundaries. It affects communities of all sizes, and we're just really glad to see the leadership here. So thank you, Tony. We look forward to seizing the opportunity and working with you all.
Dante, I appreciate it. And again, to the American Flood Coalition Environmental Defense Fund, as I said, they've got great statewide and national insights, but as well, they've got responsibility on both fronts, and the significant amount of time that they've spent with the local communities in Eastern North Carolina has been amazing and has been a blessing to our area. And I appreciate both organizations. Thank you. With that, I'm going to open it up to see if there are any questions from the media or from any other attendees. I think that's a good sign if we don't have any. I see one from John Beachley. I'm going to call on him. John?
Yes, I'd like to thank all our leaders, man, for really banding together to attack this huge issue to all our citizens and everybody. I'm in construction and have done a lot of work with the Floodplain Managers Association that I'm a member of, and local leaders to elevate homes under the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. We've been involved with probably 20 projects between Carolina Beach, Wrightsville Beach, and Topsail. And there's been a lot of bids going out lately to elevate homes, because like the one gentleman said, the towns are assessed by actuaries on how many structures there are that are below the new floodplain and have repetitive loss. And what we're finding is that there's not enough funding in these projects to be able to implement the projects. So we've been in 8 different bid processes where nobody was at the threshold that that they set right now to do the construction and elevate the structures. And my only suggestion was to maybe try to deploy more funding towards those projects to increase the resiliency of the community by having less structures that are below floodplain elevation, and also decrease the burden on the citizens for insurance.
Thank you, John. And I appreciate the work you do in our region as well. Anything from the media, any questions out there? Certainly, I see a question from Sydney with WWAY. What are the next steps following today's discussion? Well, Dante and Will, if you'd like to help, certainly chime in. I'll say from my perspective, working on behalf of Mayor Saffo and some of the other elected officials with this alliance, is we're going to continue to have conversations with elected officials. The 5-page document that provides some additional detail to these 6 items has already been handed over to several of our state legislators. I know that we have a conversation with an additional state legislator that's in a position to take action on these issues immediately following this call. And so the conversations, the amount of time that Mayor Phillips and Mayor Saffo, Mayor Ferrier, Mayor Mann, Chairman Brown, Commissioner Forte, the amount of time that they're putting in already and will be putting in going forward with their legislators is pretty immense. And so that's what we're trying to do is be the squeaky wheel on behalf of this region on these issues. And Mayor Saffo, anyone who wants to chime in, certainly can attest to that.
But, you know, I'd just like to say that this is probably, since I've been mayor and since I've been elected, it's probably the only issue that I've ever seen where it's kind of brought the urban areas and the rural communities together. If we want to support and protect our rural communities, we have to do something in regards to flood mitigation and resilience. If not, people in those areas like Terry had indicated in Fair Bluff and other places where they continuously are getting flooded are going to move from those communities. And, you know, this is a very important part of the state. It's a growing part of the state. And, you know, we've got most of your estuaries are draining into the coastal plain, eventually going out to the ocean. And we've got to do something to improve the resiliency in these communities, or else we're going to continue to deal with this issue over and over and over and spend a tremendous amount of taxpayers' dollars fixing the same thing over and over again. And as John alluded to, yes, we've got to do more to get some of these houses out of these flood-prone areas or raise the elevation of these homes. But we've also seen along the Northeast Cape Fear River in places in Pender County, in Brunswick County, in Columbus County, where people even in the aftermath of some of the previous hurricanes where they elevated their homes thinking that they would be safe. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Florence, they even got flooded. So they're having to go back in some cases, tear down their houses or even go even higher than what they built them at after Florence and after some of the other previous hurricane with Fran and some of the other ones. So this is an important issue for our part of the state. We're going to persevere. We're going to continue to bring these issues to the forefront. This part of the state deserves that. We have suffered tremendously, and we've got hurricane season only a couple of months away. And we all have a fear that, my God, when's the next Florence coming? Because it could happen this year. And we're going to be right back in the same place. And for us that have gone through these events over and over and over again, we're basically saying enough. We need help, not only from our state partners, but also our federal partners, because we have federal assets in these communities also, and we've got to do something to protect them. So our job as elected leaders is to lead, and we think this is probably one of the most important issues facing this part of the state, and we will lead, and we will continue to ask for help, and our citizens are aware of the things that we're trying to do to improve the resiliency here in this part of the state. And I appreciate all of the elected leaders and all of the people that are part of this, because I think it's probably one of the most important things that we've ever done together. And I think it's going to pay dividends, and I think we will continue to work. And look, we're getting a lot of support at the federal and the state level. I can't say that these folks have not listened to us. They have. They understand the priorities that we have, and they understand the importance of these priorities, and they don't disagree with us. And this is definitely a bipartisan issue. I want to be very clear about this. This is not Republican or Democrat, wherever you stand. This is bipartisan. This is our communities. These are our homes. These are our neighbors, and we're going to do everything in our power to improve the quality down here of life. And we're going to do what we have to do to protect our citizens in the aftermath of tropical storms or hurricanes. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, and I'll say, Sydney, as well, you know, with the help of the Environmental Defense Fund and American Flood Coalition, as well as Pew Charitable Trust, they're helping us elevate our voices at the federal level as well. And then I also say, you know, my good friend, Commissioner Forte, he always likes to say, not only should we ask for something, but we need to be a resource to our elected officials so that we can provide them some good on the ground information. So not only do we have a request out there, but we have an offer out there to be of assistance to them. I see we have another question from Adam Wagner with the News Observer. What kinds of projects would be supported by the riverine and storm management portion of this proposal? Is that mostly snag and drag, clearing debris, or are there other projects in mind? Will, Dante, if y'all want to chime in, or Chad, you're welcome to chime in as well to answer that.
Well, I can speak to Pender County's experience a little bit. One thing that we would really like to push for is part of this riverine management program and policy is a more again reliable, strategic approach to addressing nuisance animals, beavers, different things that helped increase the severity of the flooding. Right now, Pender County participates in the beaver management or the BMAP program at the federal level, and it's just not effective. You know, we contribute money to it, and the person in charge for our area is covering several counties. So Pender County has developed a program where we're going to oversee mitigation efforts as well as a beaver bounty program. I know Columbus County has a very similar program, and I think other surrounding counties do as well. But there needs to be some assistance for that because it's got to be a regional approach, and maybe funding for studies in watershed areas of the most strategic areas that need snag and drag. Because again, this is a nonpartisan issue, and it's really a non-geographical issue because flooding, you know, these rivers and streams go through counties and municipalities, and the issues don't stop at the city limits or the county line. So a regional approach to studying these choke points and problematic areas is certainly something that needs to be part of it.
Tony, I would just quickly add, I mean, I think this is really an all hands on deck approach. You know, we're going to have to look at what works in different places for different communities, whether that's stream debris removal, beavers, holding water, you know, on places where it's okay to hold that water and getting the water away from the places that, you know, we want to protect the homes and the businesses. So, you know, this is really an inclusive look at how we do stream management, and everything should be on the table to make sure that it works for local communities.
All right. Any other questions? We got just a few minutes left. If anyone wants to get anything else in. With that, mayors and county commissioners, I don't know if y'all have any final comments. Mayor Phillips, anything you want to add before we close this out?
Well, I kind of echo what Mayor Sappho said as far as our alliance is concerned. I think it's very important that we do stay in contact, or at least allow our legislative delegation to know, you know, what we're doing, how, you know, what we're trying to accomplish here, get them involved. And also, somebody mentioned about the federal level. I think that our different congressional representatives could probably help us quite a bit too, as far as funding from the national level. And I think, you know, getting them involved, or at least, you know, involving them, informing them of what we're doing, I think is very important at this stage.
With that, Mayor Sappho, you want to close us out?
Just again, like to thank everybody for participating. I'd like to thank all my elected compadres for being part of this. As you can see, we have a broad coalition and a large coalition of folks up and down the coast in eastern North Carolina, inland counties, coastal counties. And here again, where our most pressing issue is to get the resilience, to build the infrastructure protections that we all need. And I just want to again thank everybody for their participation and their help and their work. And Tony and all the staffs that have been part of this, thank you very much. And we're going to continue to move forward. And I think we've got a good plan of action, and I think we've had some tremendous response from our state representatives and our federal representatives, and I believe we'll get things done. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, if you have any questions for our friends with the media, any questions you have after the fact, feel free to address those to myself or to Julie Murphy with JPM Strategies. I appreciate their help. I want to thank again the Mayor, Environmental Defense Fund, Cape Fear Council of Government, Town of Leland, Pender County, Jacksonville, and the City of Wilmington. With that, thank you, everyone. Stay safe today and appreciate your help.